This week's episode of the Shrink Tank podcast is brought to you by Pixel Eyewear. These stylish designer computer glasses are made to filter artificial blue light produced by screens that we use every day. These glasses may help protect our eyes from strain and could lead to better sleep. To save $5 off your first pair, use the coupon code SHRINKTANK.
If psychology and pop culture had a baby, they'd call it Shrink Tank.
A new paper reveals more intelligent people are quicker to learn and unlearn.
90% chance that there's some weird animal out there.
Howard Stern's been doing this forever. And far more extreme. From Nashville and Charlotte, this is the Shrink Tank Podcast. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Dave Verhagen in Nashville, and we've got a great show for you. Our trending topic today is psychology of stupid, why smart people do dumb things. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but first, let's meet our Charlotte panel. Dr. Emma Kate Wright is here. Hello, Emma Kate.
Hi there.
Did you go trick-or-treating?
You know, I was disappointed. I did not go trick-or-treating, and I had no trick-or-treaters visit my house. It was so sad. But I live on the third floor of an apartment complex, so it kind of makes sense. Kids are getting kind of lazy, I guess.
The kids these days won't even climb to the third floor
the
for
stairs.
candy.
Had good candy, too. Kit Kats, but oh well. Oh well.
Did you dress up?
I did dress up at work. I was Hermione from Harry Potter, which was awesome. And I did thoroughly enjoy looking at my friends' Facebook feeds on Facebook because all the cute little costumes, because a lot of my buddies have babies now, and they're just all lots of cuteness. So it's a nice little break.
So cute. And Dr. Frank Gaskell is with us. And Frank, Halloween is a big holiday for you and your family?
Yes, it was a great holiday. I dressed up as Rick from Rick and Morty. It took about an hour to get all the crap out of my hair, but it was worth it. And my kids...
And that had nothing to do with the costume either.
Yeah, that's right.
Because he was getting swifty.
My kids went through the neighborhood twice and probably have 4 or 5 pounds of candy. But it was good. It was very good. I even dressed up my whippets as, or my daughter dressed up our whippets as Dobby, the house elf, and whatever the girl's elf name was.
Yeah. I told you guys yesterday when we were talking that my daughter had a kid come over for Halloween a couple years ago, and he was afraid that his mother was going to take all his candy, so he would eat it as he got it. And he probably ate 4 pounds of candy and then proceeded to projectile vomit all throughout my kitchen and living room. So that's one of my favorite Halloween memories. Jonathan Hetterly is here. He rounds out our panel. And Jonathan, did you do anything for Halloween with your kiddos?
No, we were basically Uber drivers. We dropped them off to their friends. They went and trick-or-treated. My mom's actually in town visiting from Washington State, so we all, Julie and my mom and I, we had a nice dinner at Mellow Mushroom and enjoyed not being around kids for a little while.
Well, Hetterly kind of dressed up. He came in dressed as a guy who needs a haircut. So that's...
I dressed as an accountant, as a IRS auditor.
I don't think they wear Michael J. Fox vests, dude.
Like a life preserver from the 80s?
Yeah.
Every one of Frank's references
like
is
that.
from like 3 movies in the 80s.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Every single one of them.
Yep.
And his entire playlist is like 3 bands from the 80s.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Jonathan, what story have you found for us in our first segment that we call
Being Human.
This first article comes out of the New York Times looking at what experts know about men who rape. So scientists have been gradually filling out a picture of men who commit sexual assaults, and the studies find that patterns are emerging, such as these men begin early, they may associate with others who also commit sexual violence, and they usually deny that they have raped women even as they admit to non-consensual sex. They also found that young men who expressed remorse were less likely to offend the following year, while those who blamed their victim were more likely to do it again. Emma Kate, what do you make of these patterns?
I thought this was an excellent article. Because when you really hear that, the fact that these men are acknowledging that they are engaging in acts that would fall under sexual assault, and yet they don't view themselves as having done anything wrong is so scary. And I like that this article is out there because there's always so much emphasis on the women, and we think about sexual assault as being an issue for women when that's not necessarily true. Obviously, men can be assaulted too, but there's been this shift where now we're starting to potentially talk more about the perpetrators of these acts and what's the underlying, kind of rationale. How did they get to this place where they view these sorts of acts as being acceptable or okay? It's not that maybe they're not viewing it as acceptable, but they're still doing it. And so, figuring out that it's happening early on. Yeah, let's keep exploring this. How do we talk to men about treating women appropriately?
So, do you think it's just that it's an education issue, like helping guys understand how to treat men or women appropriately, or do you think that there's some guys that the way that they think is just highly disordered about this thing?
I'm sure there probably is something just kind of in terms of disordered thinking, because again, like the article talked about, the ones that showed remorse were not likely to repeat the act, and so there could just be more of this sort of pathological sort of stuff out there. But I would like to think that we don't have that high of an incidence rate, that much prevalence for something like this, but it's concerning that maybe we do. So how can we take more preventative approaches? And I don't know what that looks like, because you're right. I don't think it's just education. There's something else there. I just don't know what.
Well, and it's interesting because the article in the study cited how most of the research in the past was on incarcerated rapists or sexual, those with sexual violence history. But they pointed to they're probably just overall criminals. Like they would have gotten in trouble for other violations of rights or things, whereas this study looked at specifically law-abiding people that weren't incarcerated, but specifically they had engaged in some type of sexual assault or violence. And it's really interesting how there's this contradiction that they would acknowledge non-consensual sex, but they would deny that they had raped a woman. And to me, that's really one of the key things that stood out, is that cognitive, gap, discrepancy right there in terms of the focus on themselves versus that empathy or that ability to read the rights of other people.
Early in my career, I did some work just out of necessity with juvenile sexual offenders, and we had to study adult offenders and juvenile offenders and the differences. And one of the things that we found, which is the point you made, is that among offenders, at least the people that have been charged, it was sexual offending was just one of, and I'm not minimizing it, I'm just saying it's just one of a bigger repertoire of criminal behavior. Like they might physically assault somebody, they might sexually assault someone, they might steal from somebody. It was sort of like this pervasive thing. It was just one of many ways that they violated other people and violated the rights of other people. So it's interesting, this study is looking at people that weren't incarcerated or weren't charged, and like what's the difference there? What kind of makes up the psyche of a guy like this? Let me ask you guys about since all this stuff is coming up with Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey, I this is a huge like watershed moment, right? And it's really like affecting the entertainment industry in a gigantic way, and I think it's going to spill over to other industries too. Like we're going to see it begin to affect Silicon Valley and the tech industries, the video gaming world, that kind of thing. Why now? Why do you think now is the time when all this is sort of like, why did the dam break now?
I wonder how much it has to do with Trump and just seeing injustice being catapulted to the top of our society, and people just like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Kind of. I feel like he was the tinderbox.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. The other thing that, I'm not so sure about, but it stands out to me is like, we've talked even in past episodes about like Woody Allen or Roman Polanski, and I've shared like, I've never seen a Woody Allen film. I think there is something about Harvey Weinstein even physically appearing very intimidating, aggressive, and I'm using this word, I'm not saying other people would, but like I would use the word repulsive looking to
Yeah.
describe
he is
him.
repulsive looking.
And I
He
think
is.
that is something that everybody could get behind, of really, condemning this man. Whereas you look at like Roman Polanski or Woody Allen or even Kevin Spacey, all of these examples of like inappropriate sexual conduct, like this goes beyond boys will be boys or somebody that just seems like innocent and harmless. Harvey Weinstein was aggressive and violent, in every which way or form. So I think it just built this. It was a catalyst that now you're seeing people saying he is part of a larger systemic problem. We can't stop with Harvey Weinstein.
Right. And I think, with all of those individuals, to a certain extent, they have a level of power over the people that they've committed these acts against. But, Harvey Weinstein, he was the ultimate power. Like, he truly was the person who could make or break your career. And he did that to people. And I think all these actors and, whomever in the industry fight so hard to get somewhere, even to maybe just meet this person. And then they have so much control over your fate. I think it's hard for them. And so this really is definitely, like you said, a watershed moment. I hope we see some big change.
So one of the arguments that you hear is that it's sort of like this is how people of a certain age or generation or in certain contexts sort of behaved. Not talking about Harvey Weinstein being outright sexually assaulting and raping people, but kind of the, groping and the making lewd comments and that kind of thing. That's sort of like what we're hearing a little bit of, like, oh, now everybody's fair game because if they've made a joke or they've made a comment or they've kind of been playful. What do you think about that? Do you think there's any merit to that, or do you think that's just a way of justifying all this kind of power differential, abuse of power over the years?
Well, I think I think that's a great question, and I don't know if there's a very clear-cut response or answer to that. I tend to think that there is definitely a distinct difference between sexism and gender inequality and abuse of power, intimidation, threat, or violation of another person's rights. I'm not saying any of those are right, but it's one thing for kind of a very sexist or antiquated view about women or conduct that is inappropriate and crosses the line, but, in terms of, but there's no physical interaction encounter, there's no threat or intimidation, because that's really what Harvey did as well. Like it's all about control and consequences if somebody challenges them for that. So I think hopefully this will lead to a larger conversation where people can acknowledge that sexism and gender inequality exists, and that instead of doubling down and defending, it's like open up and be educated and learn and the ability to change.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, one thing I keep thinking about how is now they might be taking some of this kind of situation here and turning it into legislation where, for example, Harvey Weinstein would have women sign these non-disclosure acts. But really, how is that okay, where you've assaulted this person, you're going to pay them off, and yet there's no retribution or consequence for that? So I hope we start to see people in positions of power who have the potential to be able to pay off someone for their just, indiscretion, that we start to see that shift away from that.
And some people who've signed NDAs with him have already broken them. I mean, they've taken the risk and they've just said, I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. And you also got to wonder, like, Bill O'Reilly signed a $32 million settlement. Like, what horrible thing? What horrible thing have you done that you're going to pay $32 million for? Well, and that's unbelievable.
Even listening to him in an interview talk about that, they kept trying to get so you're saying they're lying, and he says, well, yes, and it's for him, for Trump, for Weinstein, for all these people, and it maybe goes back to our earlier article about why men rape. They're incapable of saying or acknowledging anything negative about themselves. It's just, it goes against every fiber of their being.
And it's even beyond that, like the Trump administration's official position now, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders is representing this, is that all 15 or 16 of the women that accuse Trump of sexual harassment or inappropriate sexual behavior are lying. All of them.
Right. Because, where there's smoke, there's never a fire. So just saying.
Right.
Just saying.
One other part of this that I want to ask about is, most of the time Twitter just annoys me. It's just annoying, and it's noise and people being mean. It was with this whole Me Too movement, though, that I felt like something really important was happening. Like I felt like it was empowering people that needed to be empowered. A lot of times Twitter empowers the wrong people, right? Like the people that are just mean or racist or what have you. It gives them a platform. In this case, it felt like the people that didn't have a voice now had a voice, and that felt like a cool thing. Did any of you guys have a reaction to it in a same or different way?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I thought it was just this incredible opportunity for victims to be able to really voice kind of just a moment to say, yeah, this did happen, and for them to realize, okay, wow, I'm not alone. And then at the same time, though, it was also really refreshing to see people were still trying to be respectful of those who didn't even share Me Too. So it's like, okay, well, sometimes we're putting all this pressure on the victims to be the strong ones when the reality is why are we not focusing on the perpetrators as well? So it was just this beautiful dialogue that really started because of the movement.
I'll tell you, too, I saw, it wasn't on Twitter, but on Facebook, two of my colleagues at least put up Me Too and then told their story, and I was dumbfounded. Like, wow, that happened to you? That is unbelievable. And for them to be able to have the freedom to share that I was amazed.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating thing that's happening, and it seems like a good thing, and it feels like it is giving people a platform of empowerment that hopefully is going to be used for good. And I think we're going to see some changes in the entertainment industry, in the tech industry, in the investment and business industry, maybe across the board, that are going to be big. I think we're going to see this is going to be a big thing, maybe one of the biggest stories of the whole year, and certainly several years. And
I think also, Dave, I think that we're going to see just tons of women running for office. That they're just going to say, you know what, we're going to do this, and I say, please do.
Yeah, go for it. Well. We're going to shift to talk about our trending topic today, which is the psychology of stupid, why smart people do dumb things. And we're recording this the morning after Halloween, and so it gives us a chance to talk about morning after. And I don't know if any of you have any personal morning after stories that you want to share. I do not, because I'm not a partier or drinker. But anybody have any personal morning after dumb story that you want to share?
Well, it's not so much a morning after, but it's making a choice and then immediately regretting it because I'm really not a drinker, and I didn't actually really consume alcohol until I was above the age of 21. But when I was in the 5th grade, I grew up with the 80s stereotypical Asian bowl cut, which I just hated. My head was already huge, so adding extra inches on the side by, wearing a helmet hair. So I decided I wanted more of the tapered look, but I didn't know how to do that with scissors. So I said, well, it's kind of a shaved look. My sisters, they have razors. They shave their legs, so I'll just use one of their razors to kind of shave my head and to do a nice tapered look. So there I am with just sort of feeling it out my head and taking a Bic razor and just trying to clip the edges of the hair. And then at some point I do sort of I kind of survey it with my hand, and I'm realizing there's some there's some spots without much / any hair on my head.
Oh boy.
So at that point, I basically, in panic, get my mom, and I look like a Hiroshima survivor. I mean, there's at least.
I can't believe you just said that.
There is.
That was bad.
Oh my God.
There is at least 3 bald spots on my head.
Oh boy.
So so we immediately ran out and got clippers, which back then cost a lot of money. They're
Yeah.
not as common as they were now. And then my mom, for 2 years, would cut my hair until one time she did a bad job and I called her a bad word and she said she'd never cut my hair until I apologized, and I never apologized. So I started cutting my own hair.
So that was that.
Wow. Well, I've got one, Dave. And
All right.
It's sort of a habitual thing for me, and it's leaving my electronics unattended and forgetting to either turn it off, log out, or whatever. And so there are 3 sort of distinct events, or maybe 4. One, my Alexa, I left it unattended, and I happened to go onto Amazon, and there were 54 things in my shopping cart, such as
Oh no.
fake all kinds of just ridiculous stuff in my box. And so I had to delete all this and so there's that. But I'll tell you, this happened to me today. Somehow my illustrious colleague, Jonathan Hedderly, got a hold of my phone and started texting all these group texts of all this ridiculous stuff. And I'm like, it's not me, stop, blah, blah, blah. But what I also discovered is he added events to my calendar. He added mentoring with Harvey Weinstein, sleepover with Kevin Spacey, and last of which was wax my. But what's amazing is the only way I knew this occurred is because he happened to put it on my family calendar, and both my kids got notification at school on their iPads. And now I have to explain what is waxing your. So, yeah, I'm relatively intelligent, and I really regret that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
There's that.
Well,
Wow. Poor Sean's going to have a lot of editing to do post-production with this episode.
Wow. So yeah, embarrassment and guilt.
So, yeah, there's that.
That's hilarious.
I feel like the same thing where like any story I'm getting ready to tell cannot come anywhere close to that. So what's the point? What is the point? Oh boy. Well, Emma Kate, anything you want to add?
I mean, I have stories.
I have stories.
So I do a lot that I would not share on air just because, college was fun. But no, I do have one embarrassing story that was pretty funny where I was staying the night at a friend's house, and I got up in the middle of the night to go and use the restroom, and I was trying to be polite to my friend and not turn the light on. And so I'm in the bathroom and I'm like kind of shuffling around, and I'm like, okay, here's the toilet, and I start peeing, and then I realized that it was a drawer that was out, and so then I couldn't stop because midstream it's really hard to stop. So then I just pee on the floor, and that was really embarrassing. So
And this was in grad school for your
no,
PhD?
this was in college, but yeah, so that happened. I know. Oh boy.
Oh my gosh.
Dave, I'll tell you one other regret that actually
Okay.
ended up not being a regret. I used to work with adults who were disabled intellectually, it's special needs, and many of them were nonverbal, but we wanted them to have a great community experience. So I decided to take them to Six Flags, New Jersey. And this one guy who was nonverbal, he sort of could make sounds, and he pointed at the Batman roller coaster and was making sounds that I assumed meant I want to ride that. So I thought, great. And even just sort of looking at him, you knew there was a problem. We had front of the line passes. So I walked past a massive crowd of people with this guy, and the look on their faces was horror, like I was a monster. We get on the roller coaster, and they're all just judging me. The things come down, we're stuck, and now he starts screaming and freaking out as we are pulling out. I can't reach him except for my fingers, so I'm just tapping him on the shoulder. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. He screamed the entire ride. I thought, I'm going to lose my job. We get off, and everybody's judging me, and he wanted to ride again. So I was full of regret and then relief at the very end.
That's Frank's motto, regret then relief.
Oh my gosh. I'll tell you a real quick story. When I was in, this was somewhere around college age, I was actually doing a morning show in Virginia Beach. And me and the guy that I did the morning show with at this top 40 station, the station was literally overlooking Virginia Beach. Like you would look over, it was on Pacific Avenue, you'd look out to Atlantic Avenue and the beach. And we would get in at like 5:30 in the morning, do the show from 6 to 10, prep the show till 11:30 for the next day, and then we had the whole day. So we go to lunch, and then we were like bored. What else are we going to do? So we bought season passes to a water park, and we went to the water park every single day. And after a while, you get bored of the rides. So we started getting like really dangerous with the rides, where we would kick out the inner tube underneath us on the fiberglass rides, and then stop ourselves in the middle of the flume ride by just like sheer force of will, like putting your hands and your heels up, and like it would burn you, you know, like it would be really, really hot. And you'd wait for the other guy to come down and hit you with the inner tube. Then you'd both climb on the inner tube, and you'd go like 100 miles an hour. Like it was way, like you'd go way past the lip of the tube and everything. It was like super dangerous. So one time I jump out, and I'm trying to stop myself, and it's super hot. It's like boiling hot, like August in Virginia Beach. And the fiberglass is just burning my hands, my feet, and I'm like, ow, 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 ow. So finally I stop, and the inner tube hits me. I climb up, and then we go all the way down, and when we hit the water feels especially cold on my backside. And I look back there, and the entire seat of my bathing suit has been burnt out. In other words, I was coming down the inner tube with my bare behind facing the entire water park. So I regret that.
Awesome.
Hot buns Verhagen.
Hot buns. So it brings us to the bigger question of like, why do smart people do dumb things? Like we all have examples for ourselves. We talk about like people who party too much, and then on Halloween morning or the day after Halloween, or you name the holiday or the event. Why do you think people who know better do dumb stuff? What's your take on that?
Well, Dave, I did some research on this.
Go for it.
And just as intelligence is not a good predictor of life outcome, what the research I read was it's having critical thinking skills, being a sort of what's the word? You're doubtful. You're questioning. You're not just going to take it at face
Cynical?
value. Yeah, a little bit.
Cynical, suspicious.
A little bit, yeah. And the people who were strong on critical thinking skills experienced fewer negative events but critical thinkers actually did better in life.
Okay.
I mean, that makes
So what do you make of that?
Well, it means in my list of regrets that I have, I don't have very good critical thinking skills. And I would say you have very good critical thinking skills and have few regrets.
That's true. I would say that's true.
I would agree with that. I just blame my attention because I have ADHD, so it's like, I just make dumb choices sometimes because I'm like, oh, that's fun, and then I'm like, wait a minute. So a lot of people refer to me as the dumbest smart person. So I don't know. I try hard, but sometimes I get a little carried away.
There is definitely something about like impulse control, executive functioning, sensation seeking with the guys I work with that are just, hardcore ADD, ADHD guys. We work on this acronym of FTW, first thought wrong. It's this idea of like postpone, like your first thought, don't run with it. And then when you reverse FTW, it's WTF. I'm like, you're gonna regret it. And so we really work on that. And then even with the critical thinking, like the clients I work with that have a lot of addiction problems, one of the principles of 12-step work is the catchphrase, play the tape through. It's like, play what's going to happen, how the dominoes are going to fall if you make a decision to see what the likely outcome is. And it's that idea, again, of postponement, critical thinking. Can you learn from past experiences and not simply kind of relive the same mistake or repeat it?
Yeah, I mean, I know I do have critical thinking skills, and I know I'm smart, but and I'm not ADD, but if I hear something that sounds kind of like, I'm okay, that sounds good, let's go do it. And it's only after I've sort of agreed and I'm in the flow that I start to critically think. Like when we all a bunch of guys went to a Kiss concert, and at the moment I thought, okay, this is a really good idea. And then when we got there, I thought, now let's think this through. This may be a bad idea. But fortunately or unfortunately, I was dragged into the concert with the people who wanted to see me afraid.
Yeah, you can see Frank go from like FOMO to easily influenced to then the fear and anxiety kicks in.
That's with nearly everything.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Frank bought 4 people tickets saying, my mama wouldn't let me go to a concert when I was growing up, and now this is as a 40-year-old, my act of rebellion against my mother. To go to a Kiss concert. And then he gets there and he's like, okay, I'm good. I don't need to go in. So to wrap this up, how can we help Frank not be as stupid? Like, how can we help him make better decisions?
Well, have you ever heard the term lost cause, Dave? I just don't know if that's that's possible.
Yeah, if he was your client and he came in, you're like, I got nothing for you.
Yeah. I think my ship has sailed.
Well, if I tell Frank that's a good idea, do it. He'd be cynical, be like, "Why are you agreeing with me, Hedderly?" And then it's the reverse psychology with Frank.
Yeah, I mean it's just basic, stop, think, and then act before just acting. So
yeah, that doesn't sound as fun.
I actually work with a lot of my guys, and it's really about assessing the risk. Is that a risk you're worth taking? Because I think there is. A meaningful life has an element of adrenaline and sensation seeking. And obviously you want to avoid decisions that have, long-term risks or things that could really hurt yourself or others. But I think life has the capacity to be enriched by a little bit of tomfoolery or a little bit of tomfoolery or the things that you might have a little bit of regret the next day, but 24, 48, 72 hours later, life goes on. There's really no long-term collateral fallout.
Well, I'll tell you this. I have got permanent video footage of somebody in this room not using critical thinking skills, and I would just leave it at that.
We will leave it at that. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Shrink Tank podcast. We hope you'll check out shrinktank.com for great articles and videos, and follow us on Twitter at @shrink_tank. You can also like us on Facebook. We hope you will like us. Our producer and music composer is Sean Beck. For Emma Kate Wright, Jonathan Hedderly, and Frank Gaskell in Charlotte, I'm Dave Verhagen in Nashville. We hope you'll tell your friends about us, and have a great week.
Shrink Tank.com